2, 1. Hello, this is my Model T restoration and electric vehicle conversion. For the video, I'm going to split the first half, just talking about the car and going over some details on the project, and the latter half will be a slideshow of my progress. And I'm going to cut to the chase. This vehicle is not going to drive. I was trying as hard as I could, but I couldn't quite finish on time. So essentially, it's really just the restoration part, and I've done some of the electronics, and I'll touch on that later. But anyways, I guess on to the car. This car here is a 1926 Model T Ford. Henry Ford came out with the Model T in 1909, and he produced them until 1927. He produced about 15 million of them, roughly. It was the second most produced car, second to only the Volkswagen Beetle. It was really the first major success in the automotive industry, because it was cheap and your average Joe could buy one and drive it. And the best part is it's easy to fix. So anyways, you know, it doesn't look too far off from your regular car, I suppose, but there's a couple cool details that I like to point out. So the first one is when Henry Ford first came out with the car in 1909 to 1925, the only way you could start the car, once the key was in, of course, was to hand crank it. So what you do is you come to the front of the car and you grab your hand crank and you crank it over, and then hopefully, you know, once you do that a couple times, the engine would start, and away you can go. So if you come over here, you know, you can take a look at the inside. Doesn't look original because I've done a lot, I guess. But if you look down there, there would be originally 3 pedals, not what you'd expect. There would be a basically a clutch and a shifter and 1 pedal. It would be the low and the high gear, depending on how far you depress it or release it, and the neutral would be in the middle. The next pedal over, the one in the center, would be the reverse, and the one all the way over would be the brake. So you might be wondering, well, where the heck is the gas pedal? Well, good question. So if you look up here on the steering wheel and the steering column, you'll see that lever. This lever is essentially the gas. It's your throttle. And over here, something probably not many people are familiar with, this is a timing lever. So people, well, back in the day when you were driving down, you would have to time your engine according to how fast you want to go, you know, and the incline of the road, and so on and so forth. So while we're here, I might as well talk about what I've done. So these shifters are not original because the transmission had no shifters. It was just a pedal. So I made these shifters. So this we're in neutral now, but you got high and then low. And then, yeah. There's 2 batteries in this car. There's the master 72 volt battery, and then you'll have your 12 volt battery. So this is a gauge for the 12 volt battery, and I'll wire in some LED lights. If you look up to the center of the dashboard, you'll see the key. Not a lot going on here. This is original. So you have just your ammeter, and then your buttons for the Model T would be, you can either have lights, or you can have a little bit of light, or you can have nothing. So yeah. An interesting thing about the Model T is, if you're familiar with outboard engines, they run off, well, some of them run off a magneto, some lawnmowers as well. So you can run this car off a magneto. You can run it without a battery. That's why you'd hand crank it. Or you can run it with battery if you have the electric starter, which they came out with in 1925. So over here I put in, I guess you could say, like a secondary dashboard or whatever. So this has an LED light, a beeper in case anything's going wrong with the electronics, a display that you can touch, a master kill switch, and then some switches that I gotta wire in. And this, I wanted to try to keep it original, and that sounds silly because it's an electric vehicle conversion, but I try to leave the body alone as much as possible and keep the original function. So this is still the throttle. This controls what's called the potentiometer, which controls the speed of the motor, in a simple way of putting it. My favorite part about this car is if you come over here, this is where the gas, or this is where you would have filled your gas. The tank would have been under the dashboard. So I just decided I'd put the, I guess the plug in here, because, you know, it's seemed about right. So yeah. And if we come to the back, this is not the original bed, of course, because that would have rotted away, plus it was mostly metal originally. So this is a bed that I made because the bed that came with the car was really rotted, almost, you know, to the point where you don't even want to restore it. So another fun thing about the Model T is, and still today, is you only need one tail light. Well, it's really a brake light. So that's interesting, but you still need a license plate, and that's just, it'll be legal at some point. I'm getting there. All right, so in here, I needed to make a spot for the master battery, which will be about this big, so it'll sit right here. And for the battery, I'm using lithium-ion cells. If you're familiar with those, they're kind of like, I guess you could say, the new and improved battery, because just about every car, unless it's already electric, uses a lead-acid battery. The reason why lead-acid batteries are not preferable for an electric vehicle is because they're not very energy dense. So for my lithium-ion cells, I can go 20 miles, if my math is right, and it'll weigh about 60 pounds. If I wanted to use lead-acid batteries, I'd be looking at hundreds of pounds to do 20 miles per charge. And you can see, you know, I have stuff to finish, and I'll be working on that, and I'll finish it at some point. So I did the door panels, and you'll see the car wasn't gone per se when I bought it, but it was in rough shape, you know, to put it lightly. So there was some work involved. And then I got a decal. The guy who had it before me named the car Seabiscuit after the racehorse during the Great Depression, a horse that won a race that really was never expected to win much anything, but won nevertheless. Yeah, so I painted pretty much the whole car, including the wheels. I sanded the spokes down. It's wooden wheels if you haven't picked that up yet. So these are the spokes here, and they're made from wood, as you can see, something you don't usually see. And under here, here's where the magic happens. So this is my 72 volt electric DC motor. 10 minutes ago, I just welded it in place here. This is the potentiometer I was talking about, and I'll, you know, attach a wire here. And this, if you look up to the column there, this rod, I suppose, is controlled by, you know, your hand, the driver. That's the throttle per se. You can see here's the shifter linkage. This is a this is a 4-speed manual transmission, not a very popular one. It's called a Borgward transmission. That's a whole story for another day, but parts were almost impossible to find. I found it out in a barn in my town. I got it for free. It was just lying there. So I, you know, rebuilt that and restored it. Here's the I think it's a klaxon horn, pretty standard for cars in the 20s. Up here, you know, if you're into electronics or whatnot, this is what they call the master contactor. This is the motor controller, and this is some of the actual original wiring that I've, you know, yet to wire, fuse block, etc. And that just about, you know, covers what's in there. You know, I still have some bolts to tighten, so it's not a finished project by any means. I guess, you know, some other detail is I put, you know, the year 2020, or just the 20, you know, for the year. And then I guess maybe I can conclude with another cool feature about this car is you might be looking and wondering what this thing is. This is where you put your trunk, your actual physical trunk. You put it right here. So this is the trunk of the car per se. Let's see. So for my remainder of stuff to do, I gotta finish making the battery. I gotta connect the lithium ion cells. And then I gotta finish some of the wiring. And yeah, that's, easily said, hard to do. For my mentors, I had quite a few. The guy I bought the car from, his name is Carl, and he is out of Norwich, and he really helped me machine some of the parts. Now that the school was closed, I didn't have access to the shop lathes and whatnot. And then, the shop teachers, Mr. Goss and Mr. Derry, helped me a lot. I took a class in house wiring that helped some, and then I'm familiar with cars, so that also helped a lot. And I guess I'll just conclude quickly now that it's starting to rain. I guess, if you're wondering why I chose this project, I guess the simple answer is it was my weakest subject. I've always been horrible with electronics, and I pretty much still am. I got a long way to go before I call myself adequate. So I wanted to, get some experience with what the future holds. And then I like old cars, so it kind of tied in nice. But yeah, that's about that. So following this will be the slideshow. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. First start, everybody.